Hello, it's Hayden. Good to be with you again. I have been meaning to make this video for a while. I was watching the first one a little while ago to make sure that I don't speak about or pull out the same books that I used in the last one. I want to make sure I use a different set this time. So I went back to the old video to kind of check which ones I'd already spoken about. And I saw how short my hair was. And I thought, wow, it has been quite a minute since I filmed part one of this video, which granted it was in a whole other bedroom, and it's been a while. So I figured I would finally sit down and do part two. I think I mentioned in my Marsona sound conditioner review that I was waiting to film this I was waiting on a book to come in, this one in particular, this first one. I was waiting for it to come in the mail so I could speak on it and kind of cover it a little bit before I filmed this, because I knew I was going to like it and I was going to wish it was in the video, so I thought I would just wait. And what is a week or two when you've been waiting 8 months? This video is going to be in a bit of an ASMR format, just because I personally am obsessed with ASMR, and I feel as though it's easier to listen to something, especially a long format video, when the person isn't yelling at you, which I find to be the case very often with many videos that I would most likely enjoy a lot more if I wasn't being yelled at. So, that being said, I am very excited to share with you guys part two of my art book tour, which I guess it's less of a tour of art books and more so just kind of a general, well, I guess it is an art book. It's not necessarily art in the traditional sense of artwork, like a two-dimensional painting, drawing. It's photography, it's a history, just things that inspire me generally. I'm also trying to say less in videos. I'm trying to just pause until I find the word I'm looking for, as opposed to just umming my way through a conversation. So if I pause for a good 5 to 50 seconds, just bear with me. So this first book is called City of Darkness, Life in Kowloon Walled City. It's by Greg Girard and Ian Lambeau. Now, I have known about the Kowloon Walled City for a little while now. I don't know how I came about discovering it, but I remember it very much captured my interest at the time. And so when it crossed my path again, about maybe 2 weeks ago, I thought, oh, I forgot about this. So, as I do, when I find something that I'm interested in, I immediately go to see if there's a book about it. Preferably a book with pictures, because I do love to look at things. Not to sound like a child, but I do enjoy a picture book. And I found this one on abebooks.com. This is not a sponsorship for Abe Books. I just do happen to find a lot of my old books on there. And this particular book I did want to find one with photography, because photography of Kowloon Walled City is not as plentiful as would make me happy. So I thought this would be really cool to own. I kind of want to, I don't know, I might scan it just to have the photos, as I can't really find high quality uploads of them on the internet anywhere. But it has this nice sleeve. So I will just kind of show some of the photos as I find them interesting, maybe read some of the blurbs. But I'll read you the inside of the dust jacket first. For nearly 100 years, the Kowloon Walled City was known as a den of iniquity. Nevertheless, on a site measuring no more than 100 by 200 meters, without legislation and with little regard for basic services, planning regulations, or building standards, the city not only survived, it steadily grew. Through a continual process of demolition and rebuilding, with never an architect in sight, individual buildings gradually homogenized. An intricate network of communal stairways, corridors, and bridges linked one to the other, created a warren of passages that made it possible to traverse the city without once touching ground. Only at street level did the old grid of public alleyways still exist, but hemmed in and built over, usually dark, dirty, and squalid. Just 2 regulations were observed: a height limit, due to the proximity of Hong Kong's international airport, and the authorized installation of electricity to reduce the all too obvious risk of fire. I always say your house isn't cool if it isn't a huge fire risk. Safe drinking water was supplied by a mere 8 government standpipes, only one of which lay within the city boundaries. Open drains ran beside the alleys, and refuse was rarely collected. And yet, at its peak in the 1980s, the walled city was home to some 35,000 people. This was not always easy to imagine. The alleys were rarely crowded, even during what constitutes rush hour elsewhere in Hong Kong. Indeed, many appeared permanently deserted. But to the inquisitive, it became apparent that every door concealed a room alive with activity. Shops, factories, dental clinics, and apartments. There was little apparent order. All were in use throughout the day, and though there seemed to be no control, apart from the alleys, there was remarkably little squalor. True, many factories were impossibly cramped and dirty, but an underlying order kept them running. And though without windows, many apartments were as clean and tidy as any similar abode in Hong Kong. How did the walled city come about? How was it possible for so many people to live and work in such appalling conditions, and yet in apparent harmony? City of Darkness attempts to answer these questions. Before its final clearance, late in 1992, photographers Greg Girard and Ian Lambeau spent 4 years exploring the city, interviewing many of its inhabitants, and photographing them at work or in their homes. With 32 extended interviews, as well as essays on the city's history, character, and clearance, City of Darkness reproduces 320 of these photographs in color to create an extraordinary portrait of a unique community now vanished forever. Sometimes it makes me a little sad, all the places that existed in the world, that contained a bit of a lack of structure and order in the traditional sense, maybe according to the government or societal laws as we know it. and existed outside the bounds of what society is or should be, but still had a fully running system in place. I'm always in awe of human beings' ability to congregate, commune, organize. I think that we as people, especially in the 21st century, have built up this very big, fanciful system of how things work, that I think we forget that it is possible to break the rules and still have them. Find order in chaos. I think that we forget that at the end of the day, we're just very intelligent animals. And there is no one right way to do things. These pages are very waxy. So it seems as though this book is organized by individual and by location within Kowloon Walled City. Haknam, the city of darkness, the old walled city of Kowloon, has come down. Many people in Hong Kong, both Chinese and foreign, for whom it was never more than a disgusting rumor, believed it went years ago. Not so. Almost to the end it retained its seedy magnificence. It had never looked more impudent, more desperate, more evil to some eyes, more weirdly beautiful to others. For many years its limits were blurred by a dense undergrowth of squatters' shacks that spread outward from it. As the first step towards clearing the whole city, they were swept away and replaced on two of the city's four sides by a dusty park where the landscaping is only now taking hold. Excuse me. Hiccup. The city reared up abruptly from the bare ground, 10, 12, in places as many as 14 stories high, and there was no mistaking it. 6.5 acres of solid building, home to 33,000 people, the biggest slum in the world. It was also arguably the closest thing to a truly self-regulating, self-sufficient, self-determining modern city that has ever been built. For a long time, the walled city was synonymous with all that was the darkest and most threatening in China. Opium dens, warring triad gangs, huge rats, and terrible drains. But during its final years, when proper policing meant that foreign intruders and inquisitive strangers no longer risked having their cameras smashed or their throats slit, it became possible to look at it in a different, more detached light. It's an excerpt from the introduction by Peter Popham. This is a picture of the city. It looks as though this picture was taken in 1989. Now, obviously the photos I'm going to show you are not going to be as good of a representation of these photographs as they could be, because I am showing you via my IMAX photo booth screen and it is dark in here. So I encourage you, if you sound intrigued by these, or if these photos sound intriguing to you, to look them up, because they are very, very cool. Now, Kowloon Walled City has always intrigued me, well, always, since I discovered its existence, whenever that was. Because I've always had an obsession with getting lost. I have an irrefutable map in my brain. I'm never lost. I always know exactly where I'm at. Some of my friends call it my superpower, is I just am very good with maps and directions. And that, paired with our ever-growing population, in America, the constant development of neighborhoods and roadways and whatnot, neighborhoods, it feels as though it is becoming increasingly difficult to, for lack of a better term, fuck off. And I always dream about, finding a place that I can go somewhere in America that would be the furthest away from all people that I could possibly get. Where could I go that would be off the interstate, off a highway, off a road, off a path, down a driveway, in a house, in the back room of that house? Where can I go to get as far away from people as possible and lock myself in and be so tight and contained in this place? And I think about that often. I have kind of an obsession with attic bedrooms because I love the idea of being as far away from people as I could possibly be. I feel the most secure and the safest. I feel like the more distance I put between myself and the world out there, the safer I am. And I'm intrigued by this walled city of sorts because it's almost like a rampant playground where I could run in and potentially never be found, which is highly attractive of an idea to me personally. An entrance to the labyrinth looking down Loyan Street from Tung Tao Tsuen Road. Forgive my pronunciation, y'all. I'm like, that's probably so butchered, but Tung Tao Tsuen Road, the road which defined the northern perimeter of the walled city. So here's an example of what some of the streets looked like in Kowloon Walled City. Very dark, very cramped, very wet. Very cool. Honestly, I, as you can probably tell, decorate my living spaces to be as similar to this kind of environment as possible. I have many big, thick quilts that I nail to all of my windows. I like it dark. I like it brooding. I like it to smell thickly of incense. Kind of a assault on the senses, in a way. These pages are extremely waxy. It's very sad to me that there is a seeming lack of respect for people who live outside the conventions of polite society, normal society, society that plays by the rules. I feel as though individuals who are able to find a system that works for them, where they feel happy and content, they're not valued as much. I feel as though I don't know, I feel like it's just very much looked down upon. Which kind of instills a lack of hope, almost, that you could. I think it creates a dependence on the government, which, of course, is what the government would like, for us to all be dependent on them. But, you know, the government doesn't want you to believe that you could exist outside of its regulations, that you could cook, clean, plant, harvest, cultivate, raise, nourish, love, live outside of the confines of this system that it is built to contain you, basically. And it's just so fascinating to witness these little micro societies spun out of a larger culture and then evolved into its own. It's such a testament to human tenacity and creativity and intelligence. I don't know. I find it fascinating. I won't dwell too much on this particular book because I haven't really poured through it at all yet, and I'm very excited to when I get a free moment to myself. But I highly recommend you check it out. I believe there is a Vice documentary about it, which I think is a bit more short form. But I'm sure there's countless other very informative sources of information on this. Again, this book is called City of Darkness, Life in Kowloon Walled City. It's by Greg Sherrard and Anne Lambeau. It's a very good book. Lots of beautiful photographs, interviews with residents of Kowloon Walled City, and photographs of, you know, different various locations around the city and the premises. Very, very fascinating. Very, very cool stuff. Highly recommend. I suppose I will put it right here. Next, we have a book that I have not read this since I was in high school, but it was on my shelf, so I figured that I would put it in the art book tour, as it is an art book. This is a traditional art book in the traditional sense of the word. This is this is one of the earliest additions to my collection, and it is also what I was flipping through that gave me the idea. So I need to get a little bit more comfortable. This is also what gave me the idea for Ptolemaea. I'm sure you can guess. It is Dante Alighieri's Inferno, the Divine Comedy. I I remember when I was in high school and we had to read this, and my teacher described this as the Divine Comedy and then proceeded to talk about how Dante and his companion traveled through the 9 layers of hell. And I thought, that doesn't sound very funny. Turns out, comedies aren't always funny. Often is the case. This version is illustrated by William Blake. This is a beautiful, beautiful book. Now, again, don't ask me about this story because I don't remember. I don't know if it's the weed or getting COVID or what it is, but my memory is not what it used to be. It is truly regrettable. Inferno. Inferno. Dante's Inferno. Dante's Inferno. I don't know why I felt compelled to do that, but I did it. So. Henry Francis Carey first published a translation of the Inferno in 2 parts in 1805-6 and in 1814. He first published his translation of the complete Divina Commedia, entitled The Vision, or Hell, Purgatory, and Paradise, of Dante Alighieri. A revised second edition of his complete translation was published in 1819, and this version was reset and reprinted in 1831 without any alterations by Carey. The text of this Folio Society edition of the Inferno is taken from the 1851 printing of the 1819 text of The Vision. In the present edition, both spelling, except for that of proper names, and capitalization have been amended in accordance with modern conventions. The use of quotation marks for speech has also been modernized, although the rest of the original punctuation has been retained. Carey, in his notes to his translation, furnished his readers with an extensive commentary on the Divine Comedy. These notes provide historical and bibliographical information on many of the figures and events in the poem, and they explain the allegorical significance of many others, in the light of the theories of earlier Italian commentators. Carey also noted most biblical allusions and many classical ones, as well as paying particular attention to the imitations of my author by later poets, Italian and English, and to the parallels between the Divina Commedia and Dante's other writings. This is an introduction by Robin Hamlin from 1998. That was the year I was born. It has a table of contents for all of the illustrations. Now there is a very, very wordy introduction that I am going to completely skip over. Hell, an engraved illustration from an edition of Dante's Divina Commedia published in Padua in 1822. So this illustration is 202 years old. Isn't that something? I must say, I'm a huge fan of graphite work. I think graphite is one of my favorite mediums. Probably in all of traditional art. But engravings very much rival it. I have an engraving. That's not my engraving. I don't know where I put that thing, but I have a very cool engraving. Oh. It's this. This is my engraving. It's very cool. I love my engraving. Canto 1. Argument. The writer, having lost his way in a gloomy forest and being hindered by certain wild beasts from ascending a mountain, is met by Virgil, who promises to show him the punishments of hell and afterwards of purgatory, and that he shall then be conducted by Beatrice into paradise. He follows the Roman poet. In the midway of this our mortal life, I found me in a gloomy wood astray, gone from the path direct, and e'en to tell it were no easy task how savage wild that forest, how robust and rough its growth, which to remember only my dismay renews in bitterness not far from death. Yet to discourse of what there good befell, all else will I relate discovered there. How first I entered it, I scarce can say, such sleepy dullness in that instant weighed my senses down when the true path I left. But when a moment's mountain's foot I reached, where closed the valley that had pierced my heart with dread, I looked aloft and saw his shoulders broad, already vested with that planet's beam, who leads all wanderers safe through every way. Then was a little respite to the fear that in my heart's recesses deep had lain. All of that night so pitifully passed, and as a man with difficult short breath, forespent with toiling, scaped from sea to shore, turns to the perilous wide waste, and stands at gaze, e'en so my spirit that yet failed, struggling with terror, turned to view the straits that none hath passed and lived. My weary frame, after short pause recomforted, again I journeyed on over that lonely steep, the hinder foot still firmer. Scarce the ascent began when, lo, a panther, nimble, light, and covered with a speckled skin appeared. The panther in question. The illustrations are so beautiful. It is a bit past my bedtime, but I felt compelled. Let me see if I can find the canto with Ptolemea. I forget where it is. Again, for those who don't know, it's pronounced Ptolemea, like Ptolemy, who it's named after. Ptolemea. Because I tell you what, I don't expect anybody who doesn't have an interest in the Divine Comedy to know how to pronounce it. But that aside, I have heard some very, very funny pronunciations of that word. I won't dwell too much on this one either. Obviously, there's not too much in the way of art in this one as much as an illustration of the poem, but I do love it and thought it was at home in my collection. So, oh God. The next one is the Atlas of Brutalist Architecture. Brutalist architecture. This is a Phaedon book. Oh my God, it's like 4,000 pounds. Now this book, I don't know where, when, why, what, who. I don't know the specifics of my obsession with brutalist architecture. I just know how it makes me feel, and I think that there is a cold eroticism in brutalist architecture, and it always pains me when I see someone talking about how they don't like it, because I make brutalist architecture my whole personality and I take it personally. No, I'm just kidding. But I do, everybody has a right to their opinion. I'll say that. But I am a huge fan of brutalist architecture. I think the reason I love it is because it is so unforgiving and so foreign. And even when it utilizes curvature, things more common in nature, it almost feels as though it's a bastardization of it. To take something natural, such as a curved structure, tessellations. I'm specifically thinking of, I forget the name of it exactly. I'd call them the corncob apartments in Chicago. I'm sure if there's any Chicago natives watching, you know exactly what I'm talking about. That kind of repeated pattern in the structure. Even that being made out of something as cold and unforgiving as concrete. There's something very I don't know. It's very hard for me to put into words. I just get this indescribable feeling when I witness some great structure rising up out of the ground. It feels domineering, almost. It's very sexual. I will say that. It also ties in with my obsession with smokestacks and power plants. I would consider cooling towers and smokestacks, but especially cooling towers, to be extremely erotic and brutalist. And this ties into another book that, not this book, but one in the stack that I want to get to. They feel almost as though to be a temple, as though to be some kind of a reverent monument to I don't even know what. It feels as though the architect designed it to be a temple to an unnamed thing, being, place, time, ideology, possibly to science, possibly to a nation. Obviously, I think if we're going to talk about brutalism, the USSR kind of had that on. I don't know too much about the USSR. I don't know too much about Soviet Russia. The only history that I would consider myself versed in at all would be American history. The only time that I even dip my toes into anything to do with Russia, and I almost said Eastern Europe, but I don't think that Russia is part of Europe. I think it is part of Asia. Geography was the one class that I told my mom I was not doing. Geography was never my strong suit, which is funny considering I'm very good at maps. I'm chasing rabbits right now. Sex. It's sexy. Brutalist buildings are just There are times that I have been having sex and I've chosen to picture these structures. And let me tell you. My goodness. Some things that are considered brutalist, I'm not as intrigued by. I very much love straight lines. I have been scratching at the surface of, because I don't want to say reading, because I've been making very slow progress on The Fountainhead by Ayn Rand. And before you pass judgment on that, I was curious. I'm just reading it out of curiosity. I'm not going to formulate a single opinion on her work, as I have not even begun to crack the book. But I was doing just a bit of research on her, and she hails from the world of brutalism and very much seems to be drawn to these straight, stern lines as well, which I like. But I know that she's a highly, highly controversial author. And it seems to have to do with something regarding capitalism or whatnot. I'm not sure. Again, I haven't read any of her books yet. I just started reading The Fountainhead. So I'll come back with my thoughts, but don't peg me as a Randian or something. I don't claim her. But I bring her up because a strong motif for her seems to be those very aggressive, confident lines. And from the couple interviews that I've watched of hers, the bitch was horny. The bitch was horny. Horn dog. And I get it. I get it. There's something about these concrete buildings. It's just like, I think it's the reverence is where the sexuality comes in. I think it's the powerlessness, the helplessness in the presence of these structures. I get the same kind of arousal when I vomit or in airplane turbulence. It's very much the feeling of your body being seized by this great force that is beyond you, that you can't control. And something about that is very enticing. It's very sexual. It's very erotic. It feels like being picked up and held in the hand of a giant or a god. I don't know. And I think that that feeling of reverence and helplessness is felt very strongly in the presence of these buildings. Not in the sense that the building is going to sprout a hand and pick you up, or come to life and have sex with you, but there's just a power, an inherent power dynamic between oneself and a brutalist structure that feels very you know what I'm saying. One of the buildings, well, actually a lot of these buildings, this may be organized by state. I can't remember. Yeah, these seem to be organized by state. These are all in... No, I lied. These are not organized by state. The Seattle Central Library is down here, and I've actually been to this library the first time I went to Seattle, which was a crazy experience. Also included on these pages are Rainier Tower in Seattle and Freeway Park in Seattle. Now, this book contains photographs of structures from all over the world. As it is an atlas, but I'm only really interested in a certain subsect, I'll say. For instance, I have no interest in brutalist churches. Something about the implication of God overtly in a brutalist structure doesn't do it for me. I think because brutalist structures are so sexual and so foreign and so aggressive, that doesn't really fit with an image of God for me. It's like the difference of having a sex dream about a hot older man that you bumped into at the library and having a sex dream about, like, your grandpa. It's like, ew. God is a little too sterile, and he's a little too fuddy-duddy. And I don't want traces of him in something that is meant to feel alien. I think it counteracts the feeling of the structure. I think it takes it from feeling alien and domineering and mysterious and alluring and just turns it into something that's been done, into something that is familiar. And familiarity is comforting, but it's not exciting. And it's not erotic. A kind of watered down version of brutalism that I very much enjoy is overpasses. Highways, specifically very, very tall overpasses. I currently live in Pennsylvania, and because of the very uneven terrain of Pennsylvania, a lot of the overpasses are stories and stories tall. And every time I drive under one of them, it just feels like, I don't know. It feels holy in a way. A lot of these buildings are at risk of demolition and destruction. A lot of people do not like brutalism because of its cold and callous nature. Which, to me personally, feels like an attack on sexuality, because there is something forbidden and unforgiving about it, which is not very inviting, but it is welcoming. And I think that people... here we go. Bertrand Goldberg Associates, Chicago, Illinois. The Corncob Buildings. I knew they were in here somewhere. The unquestionable 20th century landmark of Chicago, the Marina City residential complex is an emblematic work by Bertrand Goldberg. Situated on the bank of the Chicago River in downtown Chicago, the Marina City complex consists of 2 cylindrical towers, which were the highest residential skyscrapers in the world at the time of their completion. The rhythmical form of rounded balconies presents a new form of high-rise, a typology mostly associated with a rectangular rational grid during the 1960s. Goldberg was commissioned by enlightened developer William McFettridge, president of the Building Service Employees International Union, to design a city within the city and attract people to stay and live in the center of Chicago, reminiscent of Kowloon. The architect designed a structure to house a complex series of uses, including residential living, communal spaces, and public services, such as a theater, a gym, a swimming pool, an ice rink, a bowling alley, a gym, I already said that, shops, restaurants, and a private marina for the residents. The cylindrical tower offers 360-degree views of Chicago and consists of 900 units in both towers, incorporating 19 floors of spiral garages at lower levels. Today, the complex maintains most of its original functions and living spaces, and it has become a popular residential location once again. One thing I will say about this book, this text is very tiny, and it makes my brain feel like mashed potatoes when I try to read it. They also have the Metropolitan Correctional Center, which stands in downtown Chicago. Strippers have put on free shows for the inmates on top of the adjacent multi-story car park, and the prisoners apparently applaud by switching their cell lights on and off. Love will find a way. The Lincoln Executive Plaza. This building is now home to Chicago's Daily Herald. So I have a personal relationship with this, the Lincoln Executive Plaza. This was one of the first buildings that I ever really fell in love with in the brutalist vein, because my best friend and I would pass it every time we would drive up into the northern suburbs to go to estate sales, which we are avid fans of. Many of the things in my house come from estate sales in Chicago. I will die on the hill that the Midwest has the best antiquing and thrifting in all of America. That is not my opinion, that is a fact. And we would always pass the Lincoln Executive Plaza on the interstate exit that we would take. And I would always look at it. Gawk at it is more of an accurate term. And I would tell her, there is just something about that building. And I talked multiple times about breaking into it, but I don't know if it's still being used by the Daily Herald, which is what I think was the most recent usage for it. I think it was possibly vacated the last couple times we passed it, but this has been probably 2-3 years ago now, so it may be utilized by some other company at this point. I don't know. But yeah, this is a really cool book. It's entirely in black and white also, which really adds to the kind of stark, cold nature of these buildings and structures, which I am a huge fan of. I didn't used to like black and white photography, and now all of a sudden I'm enamored by it. Oh, that sounds so nice. Yummy. This is Western Europe. How we start getting into European brutalism, oh good lord. It really gets crazy. I don't know if you can hear that, but it sounds amazing. Yeah. Obviously, there's way too much to get into. And I'm really trying to avoid doing an individual video for each book, but you get the general idea. Phaidon's Atlas of Brutalist Architecture. Phenomenal book. Highly recommend it if you can get your hands on a copy. Gorgeous photographs. Lots of very good descriptions. Tells you the condition of the books. Of the structures. It's kind of a must-have for all the architectural perverts out there. I accidentally grabbed a book I didn't want to put in this one. Surprise Dale appearance. I have his book. Dale Earnhardt. Determined. And I am determined to get through this video in a timely manner. So Dale, you're going to have to go in part 3. This is a cute little one I picked up. I don't know where I got this actually. I think I may have gotten this. I don't know. It's called The Texaco Story. The first 50 years. It's about Texaco, my favorite gas station. I will preface this by saying my personal relationship that I have with Texaco is when I was a child, I drove to Fort Knox, Kentucky, with my cousin and my uncle and my grandfather. If you don't know anything about me, I am from Florida. I was born and raised in Florida, in the Panhandle. Never saw snow. So, this was the first time I ever saw snow in my whole life. And I remember we were driving north through the day. We were in the back of the truck. I was listening to music on my little iPod that I got. It's the iPod Nano, I think. It was purple. And we got into Fort Knox late in the evening. And I'll never forget, this is back when they had the good street lights, the orange ones. Not that purple shit they have these days. LED. And I remember there being a thick blanket of snow. It was January. It's the first week of January. Last week of January. My apologies. And there was a thick blanket of snow over the whole town. And I remember it was glowing orange in the street lights. And it was so beautiful. And I had such a good time at Fort Knox. We went to the base, got groceries from the commissary because my pop is a veteran. And just had a good time in Fort Knox. And then right when we got there, I believe it was the next morning, we were driving from our motel to the base. We stopped to get breakfast and gas and coffee at a Texaco. And I remember I was 14. And my cousin and I had our very first snowball fight in the parking lot of the Texaco. Like out where all the truckers were, out by all the diesel pumps. Me and my cousin had our first snowball fight ever. And we actually got a picture of it. And it's somewhere, I have a framed version of it over on my bookshelf, I think, or somewhere in my room. But I will never forget the way it felt in that Texaco. It was just, there was just such a vivid memory I have of it. I just was having such a good time right there in that moment. And I'll never forget that. And I just remember being so happy in that Texaco. And, you know, I generally love the gas station in general. But Texaco kind of just has my heart. So when I saw this, I had to pick it up. This is by Marquis James. The Texaco Story. Written for the Texas Company. Now, you never really see Texacos anymore, at least not in abundance like I would like to. The only time I ever saw them was down south. I used to go to the one up in Troy, Alabama, when I would head to the airport from Daleville. And I would only get gas there because it was the only Texaco on the 3-hour drive to the airport, so I would always stop there. For narrative convenience in the text of this book, distinction is not always made between the Texas Company and subsidiaries, and in some cases, the Texas Company, Texaco, or the company is used in a sense that either includes subsidiaries or refers to subsidiaries. It's basically a written history of Texaco. This book is stamped with the Washington Township Library in Lynn, Indiana. Joseph S. Cullinan was born in Sharon, Pennsylvania. Sharon, Pennsylvania. I like to go to Donna's Diner in Sharon for breakfast sometimes. It's really good. I like to get Donna's eggs with the chives and the sour cream. Oh my God, so good. He was born in Sharon, December 31st, 1860. In 1882, he went to work for Standard Oil in Oil Creek, Pennsylvania, and in 1895 organized the Petroleum Iron Works in the same state. His interest in oil led him to Corsicana, Texas in 1897, where he established an oil refinery and later organized the Texas Fuel Company, predecessor of the Texas Company. He was also instrumental in organizing Producers Oil Company, or the Texas Company, absorbed. He was an officer and a director of Producers, as well as president and a director of the Texas Fuel Company and of a number of the Texas Company's early subsidiaries. After he left the Texas Company, he organized the first unit of what became the American Republic Corporation. He He died in Palo Alto, California, March 11th, 1937, while on a visit to the West Coast. And you see, this is why you never go to California. You die. I have a fascination with the late 1800s. Like the 1870s, 1880s. I don't know why. My goodness. It's probably past my bedtime. The frontier years. In 1902, when fire threatened Spindletop Field, Joseph S. Cullinan saved the day. Before the oil boom in 1903, Sour Lake was well known for its curative waters. Curative. Wait, where's the photos? Oh, Lord. Hi. Buy it in Texas, sell it up north. That seems to be the motto. Yeah, there's not really too much to go into that one unless I just read the written history, but it's cute. It has the little Texaco logo on the back, which I have considered tattooing on myself. I may still do it. Here's a quick one. Daisuke Tajima, Beyond the Lines. This is a book of illustrations that I am obsessed with. I very much want to get a back tattoo piece in the style of this. I believe it's all done in pen. Is that not the wildest shit you've ever seen in your whole life? Oh my god. The perspective? Crazy. There's not much to this book in the way of words. It's, I believe, just titles of pieces, and that's about it. Now, for the sake of this video, it's quiet so I can speak, but usually when I read these books, whether it's my Brutalist Architecture Atlas, this book, a lot of my books, I listen to Sega Sunset by Lorne on repeat, or Devour by Lorne. both of those songs are usually my score to anything brutalist or kind of neo-Tokyo. That's most likely due to the visualizer on YouTube for Sega Sunset being clips from Running Man, which I have on VHS, which is a segment from Neo Tokyo. It's what I always think of whenever I view artwork in this manner. My eyes just follow all the lines, and I hear the high synth of Sega Sunset. So phenomenal. So phenomenal. Just so technically impressive. I feel like this man has to go through so many pens and rollers. Yeah, this one's kind of just something to experience on your own time. But I highly recommend it. It's really good. Really good to just sit and stare at. You could follow the lines with your eyes for ever, honestly. And then the last book that we have, I know I'm gonna start rambling when I talk about it, so I saved it for last. This happens to be the book that I was speaking of earlier when we were looking to the Brutalist architecture book. It's a book also about architecture, but a bit of a different caliber. This is a sort of biography, but not really. It's about the 18th century theoretical architect Etienne Louis Boulier. I'm probably not pronouncing that right. I'm sure we all remember how much of a challenge Zdzislaw Beksiński was for me in the last video. So if I'm pronouncing Etienne Louis Boulier, Boulier, I don't know. I love him so much, despite not being able to properly pronounce his name. I'll just read you the inside of the dust jacket. I kind of have a hard time putting him into words. The growing interest taken today in the work of the French architect Etienne Louis Boulier points to a significant change of taste. It means that we are beginning to reconsider our ideas about neoclassicism, which has been too often equated with the most sterile and hidebound academicism. Jean-Marie Perreux de Montclos uses abundant illustrations to document Boulier's development as an architect, from his adoption of the concepts of French classicism to express his reaction against the Rococo, though his need to return to antiquity to achieve true architectural reform, and his elaboration of a theoretical definition of art in which he reduces the aesthetic of all fine arts to the single principle of the imitation of nature. Boulier's influence made its chief impact during the French Revolution, but with the rise of totalitarian regimes in the 20th century, there came a renewed concern with the symbolic implications of architectural design. The works of Shushev, Tatlin, and Speer show some striking similarities with Boulier's designs, though the Russian and German artists may not have been familiar with them. Etienne I don't quite know. It's difficult to put him into words because I'm less interested in him and the history of him, and more interested in his designs purely. I think that attributing his kind of surrealist, I don't want to say surrealist, grandiose yet organic designs, almost an entirely impractical structure designed with practicality in mind. I think that applying his logic to it interests me slightly less. The thing is, with these kinds of things, I think a lot of them, maybe due to time period or societal pressures or whatnot, things needed to be explained, especially if they did dwell on any measure of impracticality. They needed to have a reason. Whereas I don't really care about reasons. I care about, does it feel good? Does it feel true? Does it invigorate? Does it inspire? Does it captivate? Does it enrapture? So sometimes almost reading the explanations for certain things make me like it less. I don't know. All that to say, let me get to the designs. He proposed many structures. I believe the only structure he ever actually built was a hotel in Paris. But I'm more enamored with his sketches for proposed structures, which were, for lack of a better term, fantastical. They are magnificent. They are massive. He designed with an emphasis on natural lighting, which, of course, for the time. But the scale at which he designed was just so cavernous. I mean, it's awe-inspiring. I can't imagine standing in the center of one of these buildings where should they be constructed and brought into reality, but I don't know, it really is just something. When I first discovered him, the images, his sketches, just like invoked something. It was insane. I wish I had better words to describe it, but it's 4 o'clock in the morning and I'm at a loss for words. But it's really just something. I think one of the projects he was most known for was his proposed memorial to Isaac Newton, which would simulate daytime at night and nighttime during the day, due to pinholes in the ceiling. I feel like this is probably better than leaning all the way over there. Pinholes in the ceiling of the cenotaph, which would mimic stars during the daytime, and then a great burning fire hung from a chandelier of sorts to mimic the sun during the day, to defy the natural rules of time and the night-day cycle. But the scale at which he designed is just so grand. And really, I don't know. I feel like I need to do an entire video on him, just this book alone and his architecture. I'm doing a bad job of describing what I want to say about him and his work and what it means to me, so I think I may make a separate video about just him, as it is getting a little late and I'm very tired and having a hard time formulating thoughts. And you might wonder, well, why don't you just go to bed? Well, I have royally fucked my sleep schedule. So this is what I do all evening. I sit and I talk to myself about these books and the Minecraft videos that I have playing on TV 24/7. I've built myself a right dungeon out of my apartment, but I like it. I'm having a good time. Well, thank you anyways for watching. I very much appreciate you sitting through all 90 minutes of this video. If you made it that far, you might be skipping around. If you are, I wouldn't blame you. If you have any thoughts about the videos, let me know in the comments below. I would love to hear your thoughts. Hopefully some of the things that I talked about, rambled about, described very vaguely and sloppily, maybe they will ring a bell for you and inspire you to carry the thought on, or maybe it reminds you of something. Whatever the case, please leave your thoughts below. I love to read them and hear them. I do still have a couple more art books, so I'm going to try to film a part 3 to this video at some point. Might be another 7 to 9 months, who knows. I'm really bad with time management, but I appreciate you coming to part 2, and thank you for all of your support on part 1. I really appreciate it. I hope you guys enjoyed everything we talked about today, and I will leave links to where you could find these books for purchase in the description below. I hope you enjoy them. Thank you so much for watching. My name is Hayden Anadonia, and I will see you next time.